And we will start right away with the block right underneath our sacrum in a supported bridge pose. We're going to work our core a little bit differently to get started today. So not our traditional abs. We're just going to spend some time here in this supported bridge. So let's really make sure pelvis isn't tipping forward or tucking under, but the sacrum is down. We're cinching those two pelvic points in. We'll start with concentric activation of the psoas. So pick up your left foot, knee over the hip, hip flexion, either hand to the thigh. So same hand or cross, and push the thigh away and resist. Almost like a single leg bridge. You're going to feel that right glute work a little bit harder. And then step it down. Pick up the right foot. Either hand to the right thigh. Let's resist and activate the psoas. We're trying to push the thigh away, but not let it move. So you're just going to alternate right and left without any change in the pelvis. Notice if the ribs are thrusting up. So right now we're shortening and contracting the psoas, the hip flexor. And then the next move, we'll get a little eccentric length of the psoas. Keep that opposite foot really pushing down, almost like you're doing a single leg bridge. One more. Good, now with both feet down, I want you to have your hands either on the front ribs or between the ribs and the pelvis, and just kind of keep that space the same. So notice if the ribs pop or the belly lifts, the low back arches, we want to keep it the same. Slide your left heel away. So we're lengthening the psoas, eccentrically lengthening, and then slide it back in. Left foot comes down. Slide the right heel away. So really slow, really controlled. We want to make sure that we can find a little length and stretch here in the psoas without the ribs thrusting up toward the ceiling and without the low back arching off the block. Couple more times, getting this length. Might even feel like a little stretch for the hip flexor. Good, both feet down. You have the option to stay here in supported bridge or lift off the block and lower down. Now we'll come into a regular bridge if you've left the block. Push down into the feet, use your glutes to lift. So not using those low back muscles. Really think glutes, glutes, glutes. Cinch those two pelvic points in like you're tightening your drawstring. Now our first option, a little bit more mellow. Just alternate lifting one heel at a time. Even this is going to place a lot of demand on the glutes and all those pelvic stabilizers so that one pelvic point doesn't get higher than the other. Pelvis stays really level. If you would like, you can have hands on front ribs or between ribs and pelvis. Do a march here. Pick up one foot. Any amount. It does not have to go knee over the hip. But that's just really activating the psoas, working that single leg hip and glute strength. So whatever option you'd prefer, stay at your own pace, holding that pelvis as still and as stable as you can, really pushing into the big toes. Let's hold our bridge, both feet down, zipper the pubic bone up to the belly, really long through the low back, and we'll just stretch out that left wrist into wrist extension. Keep pushing into the feet, using the glutes to lift. Switch hands, stretch out that right wrist. Checking with your breath. Can you feel that inhale expand into the side ribs and back ribs? Hands come back down or to the front ribs. Take one more inhale. And as you exhale, we'll slowly lower down. Once you make it down, you can hug the knees in. Take a little rock side to side or up and down. And when you're ready, we'll head into quadruped. Option, of course, to use the block on the sacrum, the back of the pelvis, that low back area. Have the knees in closer than you think toward the hands, so right away we can feel that neutral spine, not arching the back. So we're going to want to keep the back as still as possible. Slide the left toes back, keeping them on the ground. Now float the left toes, thinking left glute to do the lifting, just like bridge, not the back muscles. So notice if we've arched at all, keep those ribs from thrusting. We will slowly pull the left thigh forward, hip flexion. Notice if the back wants to round, if the head drops down, if the shoulder blades spread apart, hold everything still, and then slowly extend it back. So we pull forward, this is hip flexion, the psoas is contracting. As we extend it back into hip extension, the psoas gets a little length. So keep going a couple more times, hold everything as still as you can. Really try not to have any change in the lower back. Good, lower down, quadruped, adjust as needed, and we'll slide the right toes back. Let's make sure we're not tipping the pelvis by lifting the tailbone too high, arching the back. So zipper that pubic bone up to the belly. Use the right glute to lift the toes off the ground, hip extension. Slowly pull forward, hip flexion without the back rounding, that spinal flexion, so hold neutral. Extend it back. Pull forward, nice and slow. Extend it back, almost like we're moving through water. So we should feel some effort here. Pulling forward, using that hip flexor. Extend it back. The psoas gets a little length once we come to hip extension. One more time, pull forward. Extend it back. Good, lower to quadruped. We're gonna move the block aside. Take some cat-cow here at any pace, leaving that neutral position of the spine. So coming into extension as we arch, lift the tailbone, spinal flexion as we round and tuck the tailbone. We'll find neutral again. Option to wedge your block between either thigh and the belly. You can't use both, but we'll try one if you want. And that's really going to help us keep that deep hip flexion as we lift up into down dog. So walk those knees in nice and tight for quadruped. Tuck the toes, hike the pelvis up. So we're trying to keep that block wedged between the belly and the thigh. Really feeling the thigh bones lift up, 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 up. So we're bringing the belly toward the thigh, but through the action of flexing the hip, not by changing the spine or the pelvis. If you want to pedal the feet out, stretch one heel down at a time, you can. Check in with that 360 breath around the ribs. We'll walk it back for happy squat. Try to keep the block there if you can. If you don't have it, imagine it's there. We're trying to get the belly toward the thighs without the spine changing. We push the ground away and rise up. We're going to do our resisted hip flexion march forward, just like we did on our back. You can use the block here as well. So we'll pick up the left foot. Maybe we bring the block there for a little extra length or feedback. You're going to try to push the thigh down, but don't let it move. So use that left hip flexor to resist. Left or right glute works a little bit harder. Step down and we switch. Pick up the right foot. Block her hand to the thigh. Try to push it down, but resist. Don't let it move. We're just going to keep marching our way forward. Maybe using that block for extra feedback. But feel that single leg hip and glute strength. Everything's working to stabilize the pelvis. Once you come to the front of the mat, you can put the block aside if we're using it. And let's check in with that triple S. So we want ears over the shoulders, shoulders over the ribs, ribs over the pelvis. Reach the arms forward and up. Hinge forward, belly to thighs. That's hip flexion. Quadruped to start. Hands and knees. Shoulders over your wrist. Tuck the toes. Hover the knees as you exhale. Practice not rounding the back, spreading the shoulder blades or dropping the head, but holding neutral. Tap down as you inhale. Exhale, hover the knees. Just like in down dog, think about the thigh bones really lifting up into the pelvis. Deep hip flexion. Tap down, inhale one more time. Exhale, hover. Lower the knees. Good. You can untuck the toes. We're going to step our right foot forward into a 90-90. Lift up. And again, let's really zipper that pubic bone up so pelvis is neutral, left glute is firm. We're going to bring our hands at that same placement between the ribs and the front of the pelvis. And we'll hinge. As you inhale, hinge with the feeling of a broom taped behind your back. Exhale, push into that right foot to get you back up. So as we hinge forward on the inhale, we're working that right psoas. It's contracting. And as we exhale to come back up, it's going to get a little bit more length. Couple more times. Don't try to get further down by arching or rounding. It's just coming from hinging at that right hip or flexing that right hip. Keep that left glute nice and active. Hands or fists will come down. Three-legged quadruped again. Option to put that block on your sacrum. Knees in nice and tight. Hold your neutral spine. Right toes back. Keep them on the ground to start. Zipper the pubic bone to the belly. We're going to float the right toes up using that right glute, hip extension. Now from the top of that right thigh bone, we'll externally rotate and then internally rotate. Hold everything still. The thigh bone rotates out, external rotation. Rotates in toward the body, internal rotation. So try a couple more times. Holding the low back still, cinching those two pelvic points in like you're tightening your drawstring. Now pause in neutral with the toes facing the ground. Abduct your right hip. Right toes move to the right. Pelvis doesn't change. Bring it back behind you. Abduct the right hip. Keep lifting those front ribs so we don't droop down. Bring it back behind you. Two more times. Abduct out to the right. Keep the toes facing the ground. Bring it back behind you. One more time. Abduct out to the right. Left hip stays so still. Bring it back. Lower the knee. Move the block aside. Left foot forward, 90-90. Rise up. Imaginary broom behind you. This time, right glute's going to stay really active. We zipper pubic bone to the belly. Hands between front ribs and belly. So the space there stays the same as we hinge forward. Exhale to get back up. Inhale, hinge forward. Exhale, push in that left foot to get you up. Move at your own pace, but let's make sure the spine isn't changing to hinge. We're keeping that pelvis neutral, and we're just bringing belly toward that left thigh. Doesn't matter how far you go, let's hold our alignment. Right glute nice and active. Come back up. Hands or fists come down, quadruped. Block is welcome to come to the sacrum. Slide the left toes back. Zipper the pubic bone to the belly. Float the left toes. From the top of that left thigh, we externally rotate. Internally rotate. Externally rotate the whole leg. Internally rotate. This is going to be pretty small, especially that internal rotation. I want you to think about your right thigh bone and your right hip. So the bottom hip staying really still. Movement's just coming from this left femur, which is that big leg bone. Now find neutral where the toes face the ground. Right hip stays still. We abduct to the left. Keep the toes facing the ground. Bring it back behind you. Pelvis stays still. Abduct to the left. Bring it back behind you. Low back stays still. Abduct to the left. Bring it back. Rib cage stays still. One more time. Abduct. Bring it back. Lower to quadruped. Take the block aside if you're using it. Option to head to any child's pose, any kind of cat-cow, or of course, head to a down dog and really pike the pelvis up. Pick up the front ribs so we don't droop here. Take a couple breaths, feeling that expansion into the ribs. We'll walk it forward, bent knee, forward fold. Press the ground away, rise up. All right, let's work that psoas here. Belly to thigh, hip hinge. Spine is long, quadruped. Hands and knees, shoulders over your wrist. Tuck the toes. Exhale, hover the knees without changing the spine. Lower the knees, inhale. Exhale, hover the knees, holding neutral. Lift those thigh bones up into the pelvis. Tap the knees down, inhale. One more time, exhale, hover. Lower the knees, you can untuck the toes. We'll step right foot forward. Left knee in. If you would like to put that left knee on a block for a little bit more cushion, we can tuck the toes under this time if that feels nice. Imaginary broom behind your back again. Left glute's gonna stay super firm. Zipper the pubic bone up. Left arm comes forward, protracts the shoulder blade, and then lift up. So we get all this extra length on the left side. Lift the armpit way up toward the ear. We'll side bend to the right. And then lift back up. Reach the fingertips a little higher. Side bend to the right. Lift back up. So we'll keep going. Lift the armpit up. Side bend. Keep that left glute almost pushing forward toward the front of the mat. One more time. Side bend to the right. Big hip flexor stretch. Hands come down. Move the block aside. Quadruped. Of course, you can put the block on your sacrum. Find your triple S like a broom is behind you. Right toes back. Same start. Use the right glute to float the right toes up. Make sure we didn't arch the back at all. Let's bend the right knee. We're going to get some eccentric work for the psoas. Glute pulses. This is hip extension. We try to lift the right hamstring up, the right heel up. But I don't want you to round the back, and I don't want you to extend it by drooping the belly or the ribs. So the only thing we're trying to move is this right hip and glute. Hamstring is going to help out, but as we extend the leg back behind us, the psoas is actually getting a very active stretch here. Hold that left thigh bone and left hip really still. Good, lower down, put the block aside. Left foot steps forward. Right knee slides in, 90-90. Option to bring the block under that right knee. Rise up, ears over the shoulders, ribs over the pelvis. Right glute's gonna stay really firm. Right arm comes forward. Reach the fingertips further forward, scapula protraction. Lift up, armpit way up toward the ear. Side bend to the left. Lift back up. Lift the armpit up to the ear. Side bend left. Stay active in that right glute. Come back up. So each time you reach the fingertips higher, getting more length through the right side body before we side bend. So this is a really active psoas stretch for that right side. Stay active in the right glute. Back to quadruped. Option to put the block on the sacrum. Shoulders over your wrist, hips over the knees. Left toes slide back. Zipper the pubic bone to the belly, lift the ribs up. Use the left glute to float the toes. Bend the knee, let's pulse here. Tiny little hip extension, lifting that left heel up. You can think about lifting the back of that left thigh up. So hip extension is when the leg moves behind the body. But we've got to make sure we're not coming into a back bend to do it. So it should be coming from a really active left glute and hamstring, not by drooping the ribs or the belly or tipping the pelvis. Release it down, put the block aside. You can take a couple rounds of cat-cow or even belly roll, anything that feels nice. And from our neutral quadruped, let's step our left foot out to the left into an adductor rock or inner thigh stretch. You could always have your fists down instead of palms. You can elevate your hands on blocks, but we're gonna rock back. Keep pressing into that whole left foot. So try not to just have the big toe down, try to have the pinky toe side down as well. Check in with your breath, slow it down if you can. Big expansive inhales into the rib cage. We'll bring that left knee back in for quadruped. Right foot steps out to the right. Same thing. Adductor rock, inner thigh stretch. Rock back. But keep pressing into that whole right foot like you're trying to leave your footprint on the ground. Might feel a stretch all the way up to the groin. Come back to quadruped, and we'll transition onto our backs. We're going to be in that supported position again with the block underneath the sacrum. So knees bent, lift the hips up, land that neutral pelvis on your block. Shoulder blades are down, backs of the ribs are down. We're going to pick up that left foot, hip flexion, and we'll make it passive. So you're going to grab wherever you can, either the front of the leg or behind the leg, and pull that left thigh toward the belly as much as you can without changing the low back or the pelvis. So maintain that sacrum touching the block. You can do this next move one of two ways. You can slide that right heel out like we did in the very beginning, eccentrically lengthening that right psoas, or extend that right leg up and slowly lower it down any amount. Again, the goal is to not change the spine. So don't let those ribs thrust. Don't let the low back arch or tuck. And we'll just hold here for a few breaths, whatever option you're in. Getting an active stretch for that right psoas. Let's rebend the knee, bringing that right foot down, left foot down. Reestablish our neutral position for the pelvis. The shoulder blades are on the ground. Pick up your right foot, passive hip flexion. So we're going to pull it in toward the belly as much as we can. Grab wherever it feels comfortable. Either slide the left heel out from here without anything changing, or extend the leg up. And slowly, with control, lower down to whatever your end range is. And we'll just stay for a few breaths. Breathe into those side and back ribs. Notice any difference from right to left. Bend that left knee, bringing the foot back to the ground. Right knee comes back to the ground. We'll lift off the block. Slowly lower down. And then check that triple S once again. Extend the right leg up straight or straight-ish. Hands either to the front ribs or to those hip creases. Just like we did in quadruped, the femur, the thigh bone rolls out, external rotation. Rolls in, internal rotation. Couple times, external and internal rotation. Keeping that sacrum down. So the low back doesn't change, the pelvis doesn't change. We're just rotating that hip joint. Hold your external rotation where the thigh bone's rotated out. Your toes are going to be rotated out. Bend the knee and cross it over for figure four. Now you can stay exactly where you are. You can push the right thigh away with that right hand. You could pick up the left foot, maybe bring arms out if that feels comfortable. Last option is to add a little rock to the left and then bring it back to center. So as you rock to the left side of the sacrum or over toward that left butt cheek, you're going to get a bigger pull on that outer right hip. You're getting a little stretch for those external rotators, but keep the shoulder blades down. Don't let the ribs thrust. Release it down, recheck your triple S. Left leg up as straight as it feels comfortable, hands to the ribs or the hip creases. Left femur rotates out and in. External rotation, internal rotation. Couple more times. Pelvis stays level. Hold your external rotation. Bend the knee, cross it over for your figure four. Whatever option you want to take. If you're adding that rock, you're going to rock to the right side of the pelvis and back. But it's still a controlled rock. We're not totally flopping over to that right side. We're keeping the shoulder blades down, maintaining the back ribs pretty much staying on the ground, and just deepening that stretch in the outer left hip musculature. Release it down. You're welcome to hug the knees in, rock a little side to side, or even take a happy baby if that feels nice. Few more deep breaths here. And whenever you're ready to finish up your practice, you can end on your back if that's comfortable. You could end back in a seated position. Let's close the eyes. Soften your forehead. Relax the space between the eyebrows. Unclench the jaw, maybe wiggle it around a little bit. Just pause here, take as many deep breaths as you have time for today. Whenever you're ready to finish up and move on with your day, take a moment to thank yourself for your practice today. Sending one grateful thought out into the universe.